Hello everyone, it is a pleasure to be with you today. My name is Dorothea Strueber and I am with the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, a global initiative for the United Nations. It's a pleasure to speak to you today on mobilizing the research community of the SDSN to adopt gender perspectives in the research for the SDGs. And I really hope that we can have a conversation about how and in what way participants of this year's Gender Summit might engage in our multiple activities, which I will be speaking to a little bit in the forthcoming minutes. So first of all, I would like to give you a brief overview of what the SDSN does, what we have been set up to do, and then we'll look a little bit more into the different opportunities of engagement, the current streams of programs that we have, and why it would be very important for members and participants of this year's Gender Summit to engage more on the gender perspective in the streams of work within the SDSN. So as you can see, SDSN, let me just put that to the bottom a little bit so that you can see. So we are a global network of experts in sustainable development. We have been set up in 2012 by the Secretary General of the United Nations and have been functioning under the leadership of Professor Jeffrey Sachs since 2012. We are the leading network in knowledge creation and dissemination in support of the Sustainable Development Goals, and we are committed to implementing them in local, national, and global contexts, of course. So through this network that we have, which spans all across the globe right now, we bring together different members of the research communities coming from universities, research centers, and other knowledge-creating institutions, and we encourage and very much help them focus on four main objectives. The first of which is how to make the SDGs more relevant to politics and society. So we encourage our members to provide and mobilize support for the SDGs at the highest possible political level, but also, of course, at the municipal and regional levels. We help support governments in understanding and addressing the challenges that sustainable development bring. And that already leads us to the second point of the objectives of the Networks program, which is how to implement the SDGs. So obviously, first of all, there is this awareness creation process, which we try to implement at the highest possible political level. But then, of course, the next question is how can we move forward on the SDGs? So this question of how to implement the SDGs in the regional and local context is a very important one, and we try to bring the latest available science together with politics in order to make the right decisions right now, especially now in this already started decade of action until 2030 to make the SDGs become a reality. So what this does in kind of the SDSN jargon to say is the long-term pathways, as we call them, for sustainable development. I'll speak a little bit more to all of these objectives in a little while. The third one is how to teach the SDGs. So obviously, in order to implement and work on the SDGs, we need committed individuals that know how to address certain challenges and the multifaceted challenges of the SDGs. So what we do with our program called the SDG Academy is how it's bringing together experts from all around our global network in creating those massive open online courses that are free of charge to global learnership, and obviously very high quality education on sustainable development topics. And the last goal of the SDSN and the Networks program within the SDSN is outreach and mobilization. So we call this practical solutions initiatives, where we try to gather experts from all walks of life, I want to say, around transformative and innovative projects that combine research with the latest available technology and bring those up to scale within the Networks program. Again, if anybody has questions, I'll be happy to answer them. I'm not sure how we are getting to that within this digital space, but I'll be happy to get back to you over email at any time, of course. So here you can see the current status of the SDSN network, which currently spans over more than 1,100 member institutions across the 6 continents, and we set those up in 37 national and regional networks. So here you can see in light green the ones where we have national networks. In the lighter blue we have regional networks, and in the darker blue you have where both of these, the national and the regional ones, overlap. Then the last category, or second to last category, is the baby blue, I want to say, where we have networks currently in development. And then in the light orange tone, you see recently approved networks. So what this means is that we are trying to focus or combine or bring those national or regional members that we have in all of these different countries and regions together under the leadership of a dedicated host institution within a given network, so that they can join forces under the umbrella of these different networks and, for example, jointly apply to fundraising, engage in joint research collaborations, and obviously have a stronger voice when it comes to making science available to politics and civil society. So the topic of this talk today is how we can mobilize this research community that we have within the SDSN to adopt gender perspectives in the research for the SDGs. So we know that this is definitely a very important topic which the SDSN perhaps has not been as engaged in, not for the lack of trying, but for the lack of capacities and resources within the network. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a rundown of how this might look like in case we want to continue the conversation after this summit. So the way that this could look like is essentially within the scope of a thematic network within the SDSN. So obviously when we talk about gender, we need to take into consideration not just SDG 5, but also SDG 10. And so it's really about gathering the leading experts in these cross-cutting themes and combine these international knowledge communities that there already exist, that we have within this gender summit right now, united in the digital space, in support of implementing these SDGs while serving the 4 major purposes that I'm going to speak to in a couple of minutes. So the way that this could look like is for individual members, and I'm sure that many of you already are, perhaps without even knowing it, institutionally linked to the SDSN. Again, we have more than 1,000 members worldwide right now, many of them universities, think tanks, research centers, and so forth. So it would probably be very worthwhile checking whether your institution perhaps already belongs to the SDSN, and if there is an interest to engage more deeply with our research community. So how we could imagine this to look like within the broad realm of gender and reduced inequalities would be for this group of experts to act as a virtual knowledge hub through sharing new research, policies, programmatic developments, but also, and very importantly so, educational materials, including through, as I was mentioning, the SDG Academy. Another purpose of this research group around the topic of gender could be to support the national and regional networks on these 3 following issues. So that the first one of which would be advocacy for the SDGs and operationalizing the goals in each country, but then also work on joint solutions initiatives, the long-term pathways that I mentioned, and the associated tools that policymakers might need to make progress on them. The third one is education on sustainable development, of course, including through the SDG Academy, with each of these research communities developing dedicated online educational content. So I'm going to speak to what we currently have in terms of gender within the SDG Academy, and then perhaps we can have a think on how we might be able to expand that with some of the latest available science on these topics. Coming back to the purpose of such a group would be to identify and drive new forms of SDG monitoring. I know this is a very big priority within the gender community, in conjunction, of course, with another of our work streams, which is the thematic network on data for sustainable development. I'll also be showing you a couple of their projects further on. And lastly, of course, to promote and undertake on a case-by-case basis and with additional funding as it may be needed, solution initiatives and special studies on how to achieve particular SDG goals and targets. So all of these, I think, are big questions, and I hope that we can jointly engage in a conversation on how this might be possible. But I do want to take a moment to come back to these objectives within the SDSN and how they currently apply to the topic of gender and what perhaps might be lagoons that we have within the program that we could use some help from the gender community from, in case you want to be or would like to get engaged with the SDSN. So a quick overview of what currently is out there within the gender space in the SDSN program. So within the first objective of our networks, the localization of the SDGs, we have several projects underlined. Of course, many of you will have heard about the Sustainable Development Report, our annual flagship publication, where we assess current trends and the status of SDG implementation around the world. I think, yes, so here what you can see on this little graph on SDG 5 on gender equality is the trend according to different regions over the last 10 years. So if you're interested, there's definitely opportunity for you to check that out in the full-length version of the Sustainable Development Report 2020. But also we have other projects like the thematic network on data that has come up with this report, Counting on the World to Act, which is a roadmap for governments to achieve modern data systems for sustainable development. And definitely the gender aspect is a very important one, which gets often overlooked. So we are very much appreciative of any further expertise and insights into how we can make these both reports even better and more relevant to the implementation of SDG 5 and SDG 10. Another one of our more recent initiatives is SDGs Today, a global hub for real-time SDG data, which gets filtered through these the 17 SDGs and comes up with different real-time indicators for those SDGs. So for example, for gender equality, what you can see here, we have real-time data on female world leaders, women in parliament, and digital gender gaps. So all of these are examples in which the SDSN is already engaging on the topic of gender, but I am sure, and I am sure you will agree with me on that there is definitely much more that can be done within that space. Just a screenshot that I thought might be of interest to this community on the localization of the SDG 5, where you can see the 2020 results for gender equality in the Sustainable Development Report. And here you can see the trends, so indicating whether a country is on track to achieve the SDGs by 2030. Again, if you would like to have a proper look and a more in-depth look into this data, there's much more available on the SDG Index website, sdgindex.org. Coming back to the objective 2, teaching the SDGs. So within the SDG Academy, as I mentioned, we have free educational resources from the world's leading experts on sustainable development across all 17 SDGs. Here I provided some information on the courses that we have, including SDG 5, SDG 3, which is of course very relevant for the gender sphere, and SDG 10. But definitely there is an opportunity for engagement with the members of the gender community in making these even better and in providing even better insights into why the gender perspective is so important in assessing and teaching, of course, the SDGs. Perfect. Talking a little bit about the third objective, developing long-term pathways, as we call them, for sustainable development. So I came up with a few examples that I hope might be of interest to this community, which is the 6 transformations, which is underpinned by the principles of leaving no one behind and the circularity and decoupling. So the SDG 5 and SDG 10 obviously plays a very important role in the cross-cutting transformation 1 on gender, education, and inequality, but also in the second transformation on health, well-being, and demography. And it also plays like several different roles in the sustainable food, water, land, and oceans transformation, but also perhaps in a less prominent but definitely cross-cutting way in all of the other transformations that we have come up with in order to paint a more complete picture as to how we can achieve these multiple SDGs at once, taking into consideration the synergies between them. Some more examples of long-term pathways for sustainable development is the roadmap to 2050, a manual for nations to decarbonize by mid-century, then also the Food and Land Use Coalition and the Deep Decarbonization Pathways Project. Again, if there's any particular interest on any of these initiatives, I'll be happy to answer any questions over email or in any other way that the organizers seem fit after this conference. The last of our objectives and the last opportunity for engagement with the gender community is the launching of solutions initiatives. So the SDSN has an annual flagship event, which is called the Global Solutions Forum, that we inaugurated last year in September in New York, presenting 10 solutions coming from our national and regional networks that were united by the common denominator of being truly transformative, innovative, and the game changer for the local communities. Here you can see a couple of examples from last year, which is the Beyond Waste Circular Resources Lab from SDSN Switzerland, the SDG Impact Assessment Tool, and the SDG Territorial Information System. If you're interested in learning more about them at any given point, you can find all of those at globalsolutionsforum.org. So just 2 words or maybe a couple more on the benefits of SDSN membership, which of course would be kind of the baseline action that interested participants of this community would have to take in order to engage with us in a more significant way. Again, I encourage you to check whether your institution perhaps already is a member of SDSN and get in touch with the focal point from your institution that they have put forward in the application process to the SDSN. But if you're not a member of the SDSN so far, then just let me tell you that the membership, of course, is free, and joining enables your institution to participate in the world's leading knowledge network and gain global recognition for the work that you're doing. It opens the door to the participation in the national and regional networks, and as I mentioned also, in which we would very much hope for your engagement in a thematic group on gender. We definitely would encourage and want you to share your research and the analysis that you are currently working on in your day-to-day with members of the global network in order to perhaps even pursue joint fundraising with support from the SDSN Secretariat. It also is your kind of ticket to participate in SDSN's annual events, such as the International Conference on Sustainable Development that occurs every September in New York. Usually this year it will be digital, just as this summit. And as I mentioned also, it is an opportunity for collaboration with the SDG Academy to advance education on the SDGs and obviously specifically on SDG 5 and SDG 10. Perhaps a couple of other benefits you might want to think about is that, access to the SDSN network enables you to leverage the already existing expertise within the realms of teaching, research, and local national sustainable development project for your own purposes. while also giving you the opportunity to contribute to our flagship publications, which is something that we would very much encourage you to do in the sphere of gender, being that I think we can definitely do a better job in being more mindful of sustainable development implementation and what that means for the gender community. And lastly, obviously, it's also it enables you to have access to the SDSN and its online community, while also being able to work with our youth branch, SDSN Youth. You can sign up under unsdsn.org, and if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them after this conference. Of course, this is my contact information in case you want to reach out about something in particular. I hope that we will advance this conversation as to how we can make the gender perspective more prominent in the work of the SDSN. I very much look forward in having your expertise and having your institutions join us in this quest for the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I look forward to speaking with you after this summit. Thank you very much for your attention.